Hi guys, and welcome back to World of Tanks, and I'm going to be looking at the new Glory IS-5. It's coming to the store. It's basically been bundled up with the Honour T28E, the Fatherland in there, and the Motherland as well. But you can also get the bundle with just the T28E and the Glory IS-5, and also they are coming on separately. But again, it's a timed release, which I know is quite frustrating for a lot of you that want to pick this up but don't want to pay the top price tag. Now, its listed price in Tankopedia is 15,200 gold, which is bloody expensive, to be honest, for a tier 8. I mean, the Lerva is an expensive tier 8, and what's that, about 11,000, something like that? 11,500, so yeah, 15,000. And these hero tanks, as they class them, generally do have quite a hefty price tag to them, quite a bit more so than the standard versions usually. But anyway, IS-5, what is it? Well, on a basic level, it is a stock T10, which is why I've got that there. It is a stock T10, a tier lower, with the gun from the IS-3A, or the Fatherland, because we've not got the standard IS-3A yet. So, the big question is, one of these now seems rather redundant. But which one is it, the Fatherland or the IS-5? Because, let's face it, it's kind of a very similar tank. Now, there are some differences, don't get excited, because the stock T10 is fairly nippy. It's got a decent top speed, and you have to play it a bit more like a heavy medium. This is a bit slower, and even though the engine isn't much smaller at 700 horsepower as opposed to 750, I mean, it's a 700 stock on the T10. This does feel a bit sluggish, and the terrain resistances do feel a little bit poor. Like I say, it's the gun off the IS-3A, so to me, I don't know, this has got better armour. I would say it kind of makes the Fatherland completely redundant and pointless, and I don't kind of see the point in having both of them. But anyway, it plays up to tier 10. Its bonuses are 50% silver and only a 10% XP bonus, which is, again, pretty poor, to be honest. They're normally about 15 at tier 8, so yeah, 50 and 10 silver and XP. Now, the gun doesn't get the same rate of fire as it does on the IS-3A. That gets just over 5 rounds a minute. This is 4.76. Same pen as the IS-3A's gun at 221 with 390 damage, 270 on your premium, and 61 530 for your HE. Quite a poor aiming time at 3.2 seconds, although again I think it is slightly better than the IS-3A, and pretty poor accuracy again at 0.46. Now, hull traverse on this is 26 degrees a second, and the turret is 24, which I think is, one of them is slightly better than on the Fatherland. I am kind of comparing it to that because it is same tier, same gun, etc, etc. And you've got a 360 meter view range. In fact, I need to have a look at the IS-3A now. Yeah, it is slightly better aiming time, and yeah, 5.13 on that, and the turret traverse is slightly better, but it is worse, I think, if I remember rightly. Let's have a look at a stock T10. Yeah, it is slightly worse than the stock T10, and it has a worse view range than the stock T10, but again, it does have a slightly better gun than the stock T10, which uses that horrible D25T. But don't forget, this is a tier lower. So you do have slightly more armour on the front than the IS-3A at 120 as opposed to 110. You also have 120 on the side as opposed to, I think it's about 90 on an IS-3, and I think it's about 60 on the rear, but we'll look at the proper figures anyway, and it again, similar to that. So hull armour is thicker and a bit tougher than the IS-3, the Fatherland, etc., but the turret armour isn't quite as good. Supplies wise, well, your standard ammo on this is APCR, same as it is on the Fatherland. So you will, obviously, people will probably think you're firing premium at them, but you're not, because it's your standard ammo. Your premium on here is heat rounds, high explosive anti-tank. Your standard run at 1180, premium at 5200, and your high explosive at 608. I've been very boring with my consumables as usual. Equipment wise, I've gone for the vertical stabilizer, the gun rammer, and the coated optics, because the view range on this is pretty poor. And when you're in the tier 10 matches, you're going to have to stay at range. Your frontal armor really doesn't hold up in tier 10 particularly well unless you are at range. Anybody who's been in the T10 will know, you know, how that stands up, and again, you do kind of have to use it as a bit of a heavy medium, the T10, whereas this is a bit different because it's a tier lower, so the armour can stand up to a bit more punishment down here. However, the aim time is pretty horrible, so I've been considering dropping the optics and putting a gun laying drive on it as well. Now, I have my T10 crew in it, and it's not a bad start for this vehicle, to be honest. Sixth sense, repairs, clutch braking, definitely. Brothers in arms, just try and improve everything on the tank. And off-road driving, because the terrain resistances are not particularly good either. So that's probably a good start for it. Other than that, I'm not too sure, to be honest. Maybe snapshot. Try and improve your aiming time when you're sort of sat moving your turret. I mean, if you get this hull down, it's fairly tough. Although you do have a bit of a weak spot on top of the turret. Again, anybody been through the stock T10 will know. In fact, apart from the gun and the top speed, that's pretty much the performance of this thing. But like I say, it does kind of feel sluggish. Now, module-wise, 700 horsepower engine relates to a 14.30 horsepower per tonne, which is slightly lower than the T10. It has a slower top speed as well of 42 kilometers an hour. I think it's about 50 or just over 50 for the T10. And again, I know that's a tier 9. This is not, so, you know, this is slightly faster than the IS-3A, which is possibly what I should be comparing it to be honest. 14 kilometers an hour in reverse and only a 15% chance of fire, but quite a large engine block towards the back of the tank. Your concealment as well, by the way, 0.14 and 0.08, so not brilliant. But then again, you know, it's a fairly large vehicle, what can be expected? Now, your maximum elevation on your gun is only 17 degrees, which can be an issue if something's above you, and your maximum depression is only -5 degrees, which again is pretty poor, but anybody who's used to the Russian tanks is going to be used to having like crap to no gun depression. Tracks, quite large. There are some gaps towards the top, but the terrain resistances are not brilliant. 1.4, 1.5 and 2.3, which are actually worse than the IS-3A. That does have better terrain resistances. Turret on top as usual. The radio is in the turret on the left hand side towards the rear. Ammunition blocks, pretty much the same place they are in the T10. They're kind of all over. They're down in the hull, they're in the sides behind the spaced armour, they're up in the turret as well. Now the angle ones in the side, you've got to get through spaced armour and then angled hull armour to get to those, so you might be best off just trying to get to the ones in the turret. If you make a mental note of where they are, they're possibly the easier ones to hit. Occasionally, maybe if you can get through the front, you might be able to get one of those ones. But the front, the upper glacis especially, can be quite tricky. Lower glacis not so much, and if you're up close, there's the driver's hatch as well, but we'll cover that in a moment. Crew-wise, driver down in the centre of the hull, and then you've got 3 crew members up in the hull. You've got the commander under his cupola, and then the gunner and the loader. Now, armour-wise, well, I gave you the basic figures before, which are 120 on the front, 120 on the sides, a paltry 60 on the rear, and the turret, which again is weaker than the IS-3As, at 201 on the front, 129 on the side, and 90 on the rear. Now, it does have that weak spot on top as well, so anything a 90mm gun can kind of penetrate or sort of overmatch the top of the turret, kind of like it can on the IS-3. It is harder to hit on the IS-3A though, because the front of the turret is taller. On this, it's probably about as hard to hit as it is on a normal IS-3, and also you've got the commander's hatch just behind that, so there is that weak spot on the top there. 1 to 20, that's your engine deck, your hull floor and your tracks, and don't forget your tracks act as spaced armour. 21 to 30, that's the spaced armour down the side, as you can see there, like a wedge shape. You've also got that bit on top of the turret, and that's the bit that if you are struggling to pen anywhere else on the front of the tank, you can't get to the lower glacis, try and overmatch that patch just behind the gun on the top of the turret. Like I say, 90mm gun or above should overmatch it. 31 to 50, top of your commander's hatch and the rear of the tank, or the rear upper glacis if you will. 51 to 70, rear lower glacis. The driver's viewport sort of hatch, that triangle in the middle there, and a couple of bits just around the gun mantle. 71 to 90, you've got the rear of the turret, you've got the sides of the hull, and you see just behind the spaced armour there, they are quite sloped, so it can be very tricky to get through the side of one of these things. In fact, I had a, I don't know if it was a Panther or a Panther 2 shooting at the side of this, and it just, well, it either got eaten by the tracks or kept getting eaten by the spaced armour or kept bouncing off. So I think if it was going to be between this and an IS-3A, I'd probably go for this, even though it is a bit sluggish. You've not quite got the rate of fire. The armour is there, and the armour is better, especially when you're top tier. Now, 91 to 120. That's your lower glacis, your sloped upper glacis, and again it's got the pike nose, just like the T10, just like the IS-3. And then you've got the upper sides, which is above the spaced armour. They fall into that category, and then you've got various patches around the turret and around the commander's hatches, and the turret is very patchy, so I'm not going to go into all the details on it, but I'll just sort of show you it as we go through. So 121 to 160, you've got, again, the turret just gets stronger towards the front, but it's still not great at the front with 201, and like I say, there is that pretty bad weak spot on top. 161 to 190, again, patches just towards the front and behind the gun mantle, and then the last section is just the front of the turret, but it is only 201 down at the bottom of it and just behind the gun. But your main weak spot on this really is sort of your lower glacis, the driver's port, if you're close enough, if you can't just get through the front, or like I say, overmatch that on the turret just behind the gun. Now I think that's about everything covered, so we'll get into the gameplay, see how it actually handles, and if I've got any more tips or anything else to say about it, I'll say it then. Right, so here we are for the first of the replays. It's very favourable matchmaking. It's tier 8 match, and there's some tier 6s in here, and it's on Heilbronn. Now, people that have been watching this, well, watching my channel for a while, may remember I've got to the T10, and I've been struggling with it because I kind of, rightly or wrongly, I made the assumption, you know, looking at it, that it was going to play very similar to an IS-3. And I used to play my IS-3 quite aggressively, and you know, yeah, you had to watch out for the weak spot on the top of the turret, but if you kept moving, you know, it made it hard to hit. But I used to play it quite aggressively, and you could, you know, especially when you were top tier, your armour was, you know, would stand up to quite a bit of punishment. And I looked at the T10, and I thought, okay, it's only got extra 10mm of armour on the front, but it's got a lot more on the sides. It's still got the pike nose, you know, it's probably going to play a bit similar. And it kind of doesn't, because you go up that extra tier and that extra 10mm is meaningless. And it's a lot quicker than I thought it was going to be. I mean, you can see this, when it gets going it's not bad, it just feels sluggish, just nothing feels, I don't know, the T10 feels sort of nippy. I know it's heavy and it's not going to win any speed contests, but it does feel fairly nippy for a heavy. And with this, it kind of just feels a bit slow. When you're on concrete, you know, roads, yeah, it's not bad. It kind of does feel like a stock T10 a bit more, but anything else, any sort of grass or anything like that, and that lower terrain resistance, that quite poor terrain resistance, does sort of feel like it makes a difference. Now, I suppose the gist of what I was saying, when I finally get to it, I do digress a bit. With the T10, yeah, it played completely differently to how I thought, completely differently to the IS-3. You play it more like a heavy medium, and I kind of suck in it, to be honest. I don't do too bad in it, but I'm nothing to write home about, definitely. And obviously because of that, it kind of gave me some reservations about this, but with it being that tier lower, the armour on this does stand up quite well. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I still suck in this in tier 10 matches, I really do. And in tier 10 matches you're going to have to try and get around the flank. Now with the T10 you've got the speed to do that. You don't quite do that with this, you can do it, but you've got to work around a bit further, you know, it's going to take you a bit longer to do it. And obviously you've not quite got this as high a pen as a standard IS-3, so you are going to have to bear that in mind in tier 10 matches. You've only got 221mm of penetration. If you can get around the sides, fine. Weak spots are going to be very hard to aim for because it's not very accurate. And the other thing you always have to remember as well with APCR is less effective against angled armour than armour piercing. And that has come into effect. There was one match, and I can't remember if it's one that I'm going to use or if it's one, and I fired this at... God, what was it? It was a light tank. I can't think what it was now. Sparpanzer? Leopard? I don't know, anyway. It would have been a Leopard. But anyway, there was some sort of light tank anyway that I shot at and hit the turret, and if I'd have had armor piercing, it would have probably just gone straight through. But this bounced the APCR. It did hit a bit dodgy, but it wouldn't have bounced if it was armor piercing. I'm like 99.9% certain on that. I mean, there's always that chance that RNG is just going to say no. But I am almost certain that it would not have bounced. But we've taken care of the enemy IS-5, and this Gorinich now is, well, things are not going particularly well for him. I wanted to get a bit closer to get under his gun a bit, because they don't have very good gun depression, so he couldn't get down on my lower glacis, and he did bounce, and now it's just a case of finishing him off. I think, did I bounce as well on that one that after he bounced? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention there, I must admit. Now the video that will be coming up later on is the Honor T28E video that's sort of prepared and ready for uploading later on. But we've managed to push through the town. There wasn't that many people that came this way. Oh, there weren't that many people that came this way. Sorry. And most of the teams sort of went out into the field again. And again, depending on the tank I'm in, I don't normally come to the town. However, if I'm in a heavy tank and I'm top tier and nobody's going to the town, I will go to the town. But it does depend on the tank. Generally in heavy tanks, unless there's a load of people already going to the town, I'll head there because, you know, you can do alright there, you can side scrape, and if there's no enemy resistance, or very little, you can take care of them, go straight through the town and come out very near the enemy's camp. Which is basically what we've done. Now, again, these rounds, they're just average rounds that I've had in this, and it's one of those situations where it's not a bad tank. Don't get, you know, it's not a bad tank. It is essentially an IS-3A with more armour, slightly less rate of fire, and a bigger engine. That's kind of what it is. It's not a bad tank. It's expensive for what it is. And just because it's, you know, the glory version, it is expensive. And like I say, I do kind of feel that it makes the IS-3A redundant. Because I would rather have this. I would rather sacrifice that slight rate of fire for the extra side armour and the extra power to weight ratio. I think the IS-3A's power to weight ratio is about 10 point something. 10.9, something like that. Again, that's just from memory. This is just over 14. So, I think I would probably rather have this than the IS-3A. I just feel that this makes the IS-3A completely redundant. Excuse me, just have a drink of my coffee there. Now, at one point, I thought this was actually going to turn, and the enemy team were going to turn it round on us. And I did try and chase down that TD there, which, looking back at this, was a bit unnecessary. I probably didn't need to do that, but it did look like he was going to flank round on us. I didn't want him to just escape that heavy that was going after him and get round on the back of us. But yeah, definitely looking back, I didn't need to go after that TD, and probably cost me doing a bit more damage in this match. But yeah, I would have liked to have brought you, you know, this in a tier 10, but I suck in this in a tier 10 match. I really do. And you know, I don't mind admitting that there's some tanks I can use, you know, tier 8s in a tier 10 match and come out looking alright. There's some tanks I just, yeah, this is one of them. I just kind of suck in it. And I mean, in tier 10, you've got to stay back in this. Try and get hull down if you can, and try and to sort of fulfill that supporting role. Like I say, you've not got quite the manoeuvrability of a standard T10, so you will have to adjust your gameplay over that. And obviously the T10 does get a lot more penetration on its gun and damage on its top gun. But again, like I say, that's a tier higher. But nonetheless, or nevertheless, should I say, came out that just over 3,100 damage done, 115,000 credits, and 2,350 XP. But I did only come in second. The Tiger, he had a decent round, he had a good round, so well done to him. And he's a tier 7, so obviously gets a bit more XP for shooting stuff high tier. So yeah, well done to him, but I did come in second in that one. It's just, I don't know, like I say, at tier 8, the armour on this holds up and can hold up. You do have to be very careful, and again, I didn't realise I'd used another tier 8 match until now, actually. But again, I kind of use this one because I think hopefully it should show it. I think it's got a couple of bits where I do get penned, got a couple of bits where I do bounce, and I think there's a part where the slight sluggishness of this does come into effect, I think, in this match. I hope it's this one anyway, otherwise I've just probably used the complete wrong match. But we'll see, and we'll see what happens. So again, I'm going to go straight to the corner. I'm a top tier heavy. You know, I've got decent armour, and like I say, that it's still got the pike nose from the IS-3. The lower glacis isn't quite as angled, I don't think, on this as it is on the IS-3. But this has got 10mm more armour on the front. You've still got to be careful. You're not immune to damage. You're not going to bounce everything that comes at you. But if you angle it right, and especially side scraping as well, because you've got that extra side armour. You can angle this, you've got that side armour, but don't forget with the angling, it flattens out part of the pike nose. So they are a bit trickier to use sometimes, the pike nose ones, especially if you're not used to them. You see there, I didn't quite wait for it to fully aim, but it didn't go where it was supposed to and went off and bounced off the side of his turret there. That wasn't the one I was on about in the last match, by the way. But the aim time on this is horrible. It is pretty bad. But the thing, like I say, the thing you've got to watch for with side scraping, not in tier 8 matches, and that's the thing you've got to remember. You've basically got a tier 9 hull on a tier 8. Normally with this turret you are going up against tier 9s and 10s regularly with the stock T10 with this turret, and that was what frustrates me with the stock one, was that they could just pen the turret. They could go for that weak spot on top, which tier 8s can anyway, but a lot of the tier 10s could just go straight to the front of your turret. Some of the tier 9s could as well. But being down at tier 8, that's not quite the case. And I don't think that this should get preferential matchmaking. I don't, because like I say, the IS-3A doesn't. That's got less armour than this does, and they've got the same sort of they've got the same penetration and damage stats. So yeah, I don't think it needs preferential matchmaking or anything. I just think it performs better. Well, obviously it performs better in a tier 8 match than it does in a tier 9. I don't know what I'm just going to shut up now. Don't even know what I'm talking about. But yeah, I don't know. Like I say, I don't think it's a bad tank. I think the price tag is too high. I think it, again, just to reiterate, it does make the Fatherland redundant. Originally I thought this made, the Fatherland made this redundant, but like I say, this has got the extra hull armour and the better power to weight ratio, so I think I'd probably rather have this than the Fatherland. And if I didn't already have the Fatherland, I might have picked this one up, but I do have the Fatherland, so this is one that I'm probably not going to be buying myself. But it's I don't know, was there another one recently that kind of made something redundant as well, and somebody asked me the same question, does it kind of make this redundant, and I can't think what it was. It was one that I reviewed recently, and I can't for the life of me think what it is. Oh, the Huntsman, that was it, the Huntsman, and somebody asked, does it make the FV4202P now redundant? And good question. I can't answer that. I've never had the FV4202P. Now, there's basically nobody left apart from the T-34. It was one of those funny matches, sort of. We had a bit of a fight on the corner. We won the corner, and then all of a sudden, there's only one enemy tank left. And that's it. And again, not the best match for me. Have you? Well, actually, no. These are two of the better matches for me in this tank. I am not very good in it. I've done, you know, I don't mind admitting that. I've done the best I can with it. And these are a couple of average matches. But my average damage in this has been, I'd say, between sort of 2,000 and 3,000. Maybe a bit more. Like I say, I'm not brilliant in it. And the accuracy can let you down a little bit. And I don't know. I don't know, I do tend to have those similar problems. I have it with the Fatherland. I don't account for the APCR and tend to put shots out that I probably shouldn't do, you know, armour that I shouldn't be shooting at with the APCR, but there you go. Anyway, the Glory IS-3, I hope you've enjoyed that. Here's a couple of just other sort of result screens for you as well. And I hope it's been informative. I'll be back later with another one for you. And until then, take care of that, and I'll catch you next time. See you later.